The transatlantic slave trade was first established in 1517. During its course, over 12 million Africans were seized, brutalized, and loaded onto ships bound for the New World. Many died along the way. Those that survived the arduous journey spent the rest of their lives enslaved, working long hours under brutal conditions for little reward. Clearing trees and cultivating crops on virgin fields was back-breaking work, and toiling from dawn to dusk left them with little time or energy to improve the quality of their own lives. Frequent public floggings reminded every slave of the penalty for inefficient labor, disorderly conduct, or refusal to accept the authority of a superior. As years passed, many citizens began to view slavery as a social ill. This sentiment eventually culminated on March 13, 1865, when slavery was officially made illegal within the United States. More people are enslaved today than at any other point in history. The United States itself is home to over 50,000 slaves, with an additional 16,000 being brought into the country each and every year. Victims are forced to work in a variety of industries. These include agriculture, mining, fishing, construction, and factory work. Still others are forced into domestic servitude or prostitution. They are brutally exploited and largely expendable. Back in 1850, a single slave would fetch the modern equivalent of $35,000. Today, the average price for a human life is a mere $90. As such, there is little incentive for their captors to look after their slaves' well-being.
I don't know where to start because I suffered a lot here in that house. It took me here in 1988 to come here. I stayed 12 years before they sent me out. With empty-handed, no penny, no half a penny, no.
Most of our clients are domestic workers, so they live in private homes. They work as domestic workers and nannies. They work anywhere between 12 to 20 hours a day.
In the morning, I will wake up, start to her whole children, prepare them, take them bath, put on their clothes, prepare them to go to school, wash their clothes, ironing them, fold them, put it on their drawers one by one. We cook, take care of their food.
Clean the entire bathroom from top to bottom, mop the floor, scrub the floor on their hands and knees, clean the car by hand, do the landscaping. Most of the time they aren't allowed out of the house except to take out the garbage, maybe take the children to the bus stop, pick the children up at the bus stop, maybe go food shopping sometimes. Most of the time they have their passports taken away. Occasionally they're allowed to have their own room, but many times they sleep in the basement. If they're lucky, the basement's a finished basement. Most of the time it's not.
Sometimes, every time, that's the flood. Making flood all the time. The upstairs, pack the whole toilet, whole do they make, all of the protein down, coming out. I am the one that suffer it. They press it back, start to collect all the do, write them, correct, and write the one food, I tie it, take it outside, start again until the do stop to come out.
Medical care is one huge issue for a lot of clients. I've had clients who come in and who had no teeth left because they were never taken to the dentist. other clients who had been in a trafficking situation for 6 years and had never been taken to a gynecologist, who had, chronic back problems, who've had, head injuries that weren't taken care of, back problems that weren't taken care of, serious medical conditions that had never been taken care of, and dental problems. Dental problems are a chronic problem for many of the traffic clients that we end up having.
Sometimes my high blood pressure will up. See that sometimes I try to fall because of this high blood pressure dizziness, but I have no choice to say no.
Some clients I've had have been raped. Some have been physically abused. I've had, I mentioned before, a client who's the employer locked up the refrigerator with a big padlock. I've had employers who've used the kids as a means of keeping the domestic worker under control. In domestic worker cases, there's a very sort of unusual relationship or very unique relationship between the domestic worker and the children in the family. They raise those children. They feel like those children are theirs in some cases. They've been with the kids for 12 hours a day for the last 6 years, and they don't want anything bad to happen to the kids. What happens if the parents go to jail? What's going to happen to the kids? Where the kids going to end up? And so they have a definite connection with the children, and they're very scared about what's going to happen to them. So sometimes they sacrifice themselves, and they sacrifice getting any kind of immigration benefit. They sacrifice getting any money that they're owed in order for the children not to end up in a bad situation.
The battery shot tried to go and take police and catch her because he abused me and made me a slave, everything. They tried to go and take care of that matter. They will get a lawyer. They get their lawyer to go and so they'll help them to go and deal with them. I said no. Leave the God decide. I said leave them. Maybe tomorrow he can change. But I think that he's a human being. I don't even know that he is a monster. I said don't touch. I don't want to make anything wrong with her.
They get a job in the United States working for an ambassador or somebody who has diplomatic immunity in the United States. This is a very common story. And they're told that they are going to cook, clean, do the laundry, do the dishes, do everything for this family. And they have the wife of the diplomat screams and yells at them all the time. They're frightened for their life because they're told that, Americans don't like people from foreign countries, don't leave the house, everybody's going to know that you're not supposed to be here. Really threatened. They're not paid. They're not allowed to call home.
That in the Middle Age, when I came here, I never see them. I don't know. I can see them on the way. I will not know them. When they give me that money, I will not use it to take care of myself because all my heart is in that children I live at home. I just write it like that. Give them. I can stay hungry because they are very important to me.
When we talk about trafficking, there's usually a push factor and a pull factor. The push factors that we're talking about are things that make them want to leave the situation where they are. A lot of times for people, poverty is a huge factor. People don't have opportunities in their home countries.
While globalization has been great for many people in expanding economic opportunity, there's a whole lot of people who are left behind. And it's those people, families, both adults and children, who are desperately seeking a place that they can go to where they can make a living to support their families.
I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters, and I'm an orphan. My journey to America began after losing both my parents and a long suffering from poverty. I now understand my parents' deaths could have been prevented with the right medical care. In Kalingalinga, people die daily from easily preventable diseases. Approximately 70% of the people survive on less than $1 and 1 meal per day.
And really, poverty drives so much of the trafficking problem. People want to work. They need to work. They need to support their families. And so if there's no investment in their home country, if there's no good economic opportunity, they will desperately seek a place to go to get a job.
Traffickers really take advantage of those vulnerability factors to target people who are at risk. It makes it easier for them to draw in those people. And they just make lots of promises about your life is going to be better. I know of a job where you can make a lot of money. You'll be able to go to school. You can have a car, a house.
In 1998, my dream came true when a nonprofit American Christian organization, TTT Partners in Education, based in Sherman, Texas, promised to build schools in Zambia in return for my work in the United States with the Zambian a cappella boys choir. Also promised was a monthly income for my poor, uneducated family and education for me while in America. In Zambia, it is easy to convince people with hopes of a better life and future. Who would not want to come to America? When you live on less than $1 per day, America is heaven. Sometimes, even when people know their sacrifices ahead, they are enticed to go because of the promises.
This is an opportunity to finally get their first leg up on the economic ladder, the first rung. If we can just get somebody into one of the central economies with a good job. And then, of course, they let her go. Her passport's taken away. She doesn't speak the language. She doesn't know where she is. She's completely under the control of the traffickers. And that's how it happens.
I fell for the dream to help my community, my ailing Zambian family, and looked ahead for a brighter future for myself. Unfortunately, my dreams were shattered as I became a slave, singing 4 to 7 concerts a day, asking for love offerings, selling CDs, and having no control over my life.
Now we have a person who's taken out of their familiar setting. They don't speak the language. They're not familiar with the customs. They don't have family connections. Really, they're kind of alienated and displaced from the rest of society.
My passport was withheld from me. I was made to believe if I escaped, I'd be caught and deported because no one would have any interest in helping me.
The trafficker has said over and over again, I'm going to turn you into law enforcement, they're going to deport you, they're going to put you in jail, everyone's going to know that you're bad. And so there's a fear that's been built in against law enforcement, and now we're asking them to go and really open up about very personal and, for a lot of people, shameful things that have happened to them.
I remembered in my Zambian community that police and government officials were known to take bribes. So why would I believe any official from another country to be any different than what I knew from home, especially with language barriers? To come to the United States and then you start singing, and when you ask them, when are you going to start building the schools? Or when are we going to start going to school? When are you going to start, paying our families? And having all of those questions not answered was completely debilitating. You can imagine a 11-year-old kid, and you're trying to learn so many different things at that age already. And then to learn, you're asking yourself the question, should I trust this person or not?
What we know about early trauma is that it has a much wider range of impact because children are really still learning about who am I? What is the world around me? Can I trust people? Am I safe? Am I okay? Am I good? And negative traumatic early experiences really impact their sense of self and their relationships with other people.
I was taught and asked to sing and smile at all times, even in time of sickness or exhaustion. If I inquired about money or school, Bible scriptures on obedience and respect were embellished to shame me. If we did not sing, the choir manager cut off the gas for the stove so we could not cook. Sometimes I felt like a puppet on a string being moved around. Many days we got up at 4:30 a.m. to travel to sing. At the home base, we cooked and did laundry regardless of our schedule.
A lot of times people work every day of the week. They'll work 12, 14, 15, 20 hours a day. They really are sleeping for a few hours, and then they get up and they're working all day long and into the night, and they fall into bed exhausted at night, and then they wake up the next morning and they do it all again and again and again. And so they don't really have the mental energy or the emotional energy to think about how to get myself out of this situation.
Our suffering was both psychological and physical. Just 3 months after we arrived, we were forced to run laps and help hand dig a swimming pool in Texas before choir rehearsals. This was miserable and extremely strenuous for my young 11-year-old body.
And then there are beatings, people burned with cigarettes, people pushed downstairs, head injuries as a result of that, and sexual assault and abuse. Really, some of it gets to the point of torture. So there's a whole range of means that traffickers use to keep people entrapped in these situations.
It really does speak to the supply side and demand side being different, because while poverty may be a driving force in many countries, you'd be hard pressed to say that that's the main cause of children being sexually exploited in the United States.
My story starts with being 15 years old and having a crush on a boy that was off limits. He offered to give me a ride home, and I jumped at the chance. But I thought he was taking me home. He didn't, and I was date raped that afternoon. During the rape, without my knowing, some of his male relatives who were involved in a large criminal ring took pictures of me at advantageous moments that made it look like it was a consensual sexual act. These men had a plan. They produced the photos a few days later and forced me to earn them back over the course of the next few years. They threatened me, stating that they would show the pictures to my father, my family, my school, my church members. They threatened to physically harm my family if I didn't do what they said. They watched and threatened my little brother as well, making sure that he was so scared that he kept his mouth shut.
Even if the trafficker is taken in for questioning or arrested, there might also be traffickers' associates around. A lot of times we can't offer protections for family members back home.
Cars would follow my little brother and I home as we walked home from school. A car would pull up next to me with a man inside, a knife laying upon his lap, as he patted the seat next to him, demanding I get in immediately. I would be taken and driven away from my home, not knowing where I was going, where I would end up, with no way of escaping until they were finished with me. Time and time again, and I was only a child. They threatened my life and that of my family on a daily basis, and I essentially became a middle-class teenage sex slave.
And you can't imagine it happening in the United States. I mean, that's I think one of the things that stood in the way of people identifying trafficking victims, that they just can't believe that happened. That can't be.
But by not believing it, it forces victims to remain silent. And then the victims have no chance to become survivors.
Pimps are out looking for kids to bring in to work for them. They look for them. They're hanging around outside of playgrounds, outside of group homes, looking for vulnerable kids. And especially if they can get their hands on a kid who's been sexually abused, it's his job, as this pimp put it. They've been raped so many times, it's my job to teach them. They might as well get paid for it.
Everyone has a vulnerable spot. When you go home today, I'd like you to think about what is yours. Everyone has one. It could be your wife, your children, your family, your career, your religion, your pride. Traffickers prey on people's insecurities, and we all have them.
In the generalized prostitution market, girls, as soon as they're developed, really are eligible to be recruited. And so, 12 years old is not uncommon now.
During my junior year of high school, I was kidnapped in the middle of the night by some men in this group. I was taken to a dingy, dirty motel in the middle of inner city Detroit to be shared with dozens of men. I was beaten and drugged and sexually molested over and over again that night, not knowing where I was, with no way to get home, no shoes, and discovering that my clothes had been soaked full of in a bathtub full of water. I was cold, sore, scared, and left for dead with no money and no way to get home.
Shame is a huge problem for trafficking victims, and for many people, there is some sort of cultural contribution to that.
When the police finally brought me home that night that I had been kidnapped, my parents didn't ask if I was okay. They had assumed that I had snuck out to have fun. Whoring around, they thought, right? They didn't notice the fact that I didn't have any shoes on. I was still wearing my pajamas, which were soaking wet and badly crumpled, and that I was in shock. They only saw the embarrassment that a policeman had brought home their daughter in the nice suburb while the sun was starting to rise, and hoping that the neighbors didn't see this.
There was one example of a young woman who had been sexually assaulted as a very young teenager, and she hadn't told her family because she was afraid that they would blame her, that they would judge her, and that she would have brought shame on her family. And so she didn't tell them for a couple years. And then when she ended up getting up the courage to tell them, her brother beat her. And so the message there to her was that it was her fault, was that she had brought shame on her family, and that she was ruined.
Which breaks my heart because she's the victim, but she's the one who has internalized it as seeing it as she's bad. You know, she can't speak about it because it's too bad.
These levels of shame really contribute to the isolation and keep people in trafficking situations.
Survivors are not coming forth because it's shameful. I'm sorry, but it's terrible to stand here and tell you these things. And we take a hit in our life for it.
I have found that sometimes audiences think that children especially are so beaten down by this that they have no life afterwards. And the fact is that many of them do go on to live a strong and healthy life, which is really important to point out that, they can survive, they can go on, they can do good afterwards. And some of them are the most tenacious, most powerful, outspoken, angry leaders that you'll ever see.